Yeah,
And,
I saw it.
So it's just for discussion tonight, so.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh, we're not voting on anything for that?
No, just
You-
discussion on that.
You are on.
Yeah, you're
You
live
are
right now.
on YouTube live now.
All right.
Oh, very good. I think the only thing I'm voting on is this one, the Bullet Street corner.
That's the only motion, yeah.
Yeah. If we decide to do it.
Right.
Let me check and see. Do you get to call anybody?
Yes, I do.
All right, let me see who's out there. I'll see.
Yeah. I was looking at that.
Seems like.
Mm. That's on the Johnson shop.
So is Matt, Garrett, and Andy all gonna be by phone? Okay.
Hello.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Hey, you're on speaker.
Okay.
Okay, hang on one sec.
The number you dialed is not in service.
Well, never mind, no wrong then.
Which one is that?
Garrett.
I have his number. At least I can match it with what you just played. I think I do.
It could have just been my fingers too.
Yes, Garrett Weaver.
You have 293-9219.
Yes. Oh, 239.
Hi, Andy.
How you doing?
You're on speaker. Give me 1 sec. Let me try to call Garrett again.
Okay.
239. Did you say 293?
I did. So 717-239.
239-9219.
So I'm dyslexic. is what you're telling me.
And then you seem pretty coordinated to me. Matt.
Hey, Garrett. You're on speaker, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, everyone should be there.
Yeah, Amanda.
She just stepped out.
Is it Jim?
Yes, it is. Anything we can help you out with?
Something out there.
Well, I'll make sure from now, they're on the phone, that they muted if they're not talking. It makes it a whole lot easier with the background noise.
Okay, I get there's three of you that are joining us. I'm not
You
sure.
know what I
whether
mean?
they're
Just
or not.
kind of mute so you can't, if you need to talk, just unmute. But if it stays unmuted, it's background noise. It's really hard to hear what you guys are talking.
Okay, Matt and Garrett, did you hear that request from Andy?
Yep, I'm already muted.
All right, thank you.
Yep, you got it.
Everybody here is presenting? Okay. All right, well, good evening and welcome. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Quick reminder for everybody in attendance, if you did not do so already, there's a yellow tablet right inside the door. If you could please provide your name and address, we would appreciate that. Also want to let you know, for those presenting, that there's 4 planning commission members here this evening, and we have 3 who have joined us by phone, so you may get a question or so from them as well. If you would, please stand and pledge the flag.
Go
allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, for the planning commission members, you should have received minutes in your packet from March 19th. So if you have a chance to review those, and if they are in order, I would be looking for a motion to approve those.
Move to approve the minutes as submitted.
All right, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, I guess all three of you on the phone, you agree with the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
All right, great, thanks. Next is time for public comment. This pertains to anything that's not on the agenda this evening. I'm not sure if there's anything coming in via YouTube for questions. Okay. If not, then we'll move on to new business, and the first item is the RV Mart at 2817 Willow Street Pike.
The applicant is not here tonight. I thought it was just appropriate to allow you to review what they were submitting. They are requesting a special exception modification. With that, they received a variance previously as well. So this will come back before you in the event that they are able to modify that special exception for land development modification as well. So I just wanted you to see the application and the plan, answer any questions that you might have, relay anything to the applicant and the board when it moves on.
One item that we did discuss, I was asking why they wanted to move the building from, I guess it was November 19th, or excuse me, November 12th, special exception. They had, at the zoning hearing board, they wanted to move from the location they had shown to the border up against residential homes on the south side of the property. That's probably the biggest change. And I guess evidently it's due to stormwater management was one of the reasons they were citing to relocate the building.
I'm not speaking. Are you looking at me?
Well, no, I'm just looking at anybody in general.
I was looking through the information, I did not see it in our packet. So I agree with you that that's
The reasoning.
that's a reasoning question.
Yeah, when I looked at it, the only concern I had was it was moving right up against the backyard of some residential homes.
I would say
So they
the
had-
same thing.
Originally, at first, it was, business backing up to another business, and then there's buffer reduction next to residential homes, so there may be some concerns between noise, HVAC units, fans, those type of elements that may or may not come along with the building, I'm not sure. And also we have to discuss maybe the height. I didn't see anything that related to the height of the structure there as well.
And that falls within the Main Street, what do they call it, the Main Street District, or that's as far as the zoning,
Yes.
that's the Main Street.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments from anyone present?
I think I would just, to add to that, I'm curious, we'll do at some of this. When there is a change like that, do the residents that are most directly involved have opportunity to speak into that at all?
They do.
Okay.
When it actually goes to the zoning hearing board for the modification next month, all of the adjacent property owners and budding property owners receive notification of the hearing. And the property is posted and it'll be publicized in the newspaper.
Okay.
Kim, I have a question, man. This is Andy. Just out of curiosity, where the building is being proposed to move to, the 3D elevation views they sent along, is that I'm trying to orient myself if that's actually showing that or if that's showing something different.
The three.
'Cause I can't,
Yes, that rendering is showing what they are proposed, I'm assuming that's to scale. But that is showing what they are proposing in the new location.
all right, I'm just struggling to, it doesn't look like it's for this, okay. Doesn't look like that, the L-shaped building that they're proposing.
Well, the old plan had an L-shaped building, the new plan, proposed one, it's a linear building, and it's on the south side. When you first enter off Willow Street Pike, it'd be immediately on the left side.
Okay,
You're back up to homes on, Milan Avenue. Same square footage.
Correct. Yeah, the building, so the building with the blue roof is what they're proposing in the new location. The first rendering, I'm assuming that that smaller, whole building garage is the auto business next door. So from this view, from that residential property, essentially, you can't see the building.
Any other questions or comments from everyone working remotely? Garrett, Andy, Matt?
not really this time, other than we're just gonna be given that, it's okay to get that building that close, just so I'm clear, right?
If the modification of their special exception passes, it would come back before you for a modification of land development. So you would see
Okay.
that site plan at that time.
Yeah, we won't be taking any action on the plan that was presented tonight. This is just for discussion purposes, just to see it, and then it will be back before us in another date.
Got it, I don't have any other questions for now.
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll close discussion on the RV March and move on to the Smucker Welding presentation at 501 Strasburg Pike.
Do they have copies of the plan or?
It should, yes.
Okay, we might need it just so Larry can reference some things if you want. Do you mind if I take this off the top?
That's completely up to you.
Okay. It's just kind of muffled.
And the mic
It's,
is here.
yep. Hello, my name is Riley Noetzel. I'm with Barley Snyder, and I have with me Larry Prescott with Professional Design and Construction, and also Steve Smucker with Smucker Welding Shop, who's the applicant. I just wanted to go over a little background of how we got here. Steve owns Smucker Welding Shop, which is based in East Lampeter Township, and it's outgrown its current location. He does welding and repair of farm equipment and engines. It's an ancillary farm business right now. And back the past couple of months, we've been before you and the Board of Supervisors for a text amendment to add a new use in the Ag District to permit farm service business. And that use was approved in April of this year. And by that, it allowed farm service business to be conducted as a conditional use in the Ag zone. So now we're back before you and eventually the Board of Supervisors for conditional use approval for that use. So today we're in seeking approval pursuant to section 285-26.B.2b to have a farm service business at this property, which is a plus or minus 5 acre tract to be subdivided eventually from the parent tract. And then that's subject to the requirements in section 285-4219, which was also requirements that were created by the text amendment. So I'm going to turn over to Larry now because he has copies of the site plan and he'll actually go over some of the proposed improvements and designs.
Yeah, the drawings I wrote were the same ones that were in your package that we submitted. And I'll just go through how the plans meet the requirements of the ordinance for what we're proposing. Let's see. Yeah, as Riley mentioned, the parent tract is roughly 30 acres now, currently zoned agricultural. We're looking at a portion of it that would be a 5 acre subdivision down in the corner right along Strasburg Pike. And it's directly across the street from an IM zone with other businesses located there as well. Conestoga Country Kitchens is directly across the street, and Smucker Welding, Fabricating, and Home Improvement is right diagonally down the street as well. So our proposed plan we created a sheet that goes over the zoning requirements of this district, which is in the upper corner. Using the conditional use hearing that we had, we have a minimum lot width of 200 feet, which is 150 feet at the lot line. Where we meet the requirements of that. We're at 353 feet and 418 at the lot line. We meet the minimum requirement for depth of a lot is 200 feet. We have 500. The building setbacks are 50 feet in the front yard. We're setting the building right now 100 feet back from Strasburg Pike. And the side yards are both 50-foot setbacks, and we're well within that. We're at about 100 on one side and 150 feet on the other side. Part of this property does have a utility right-of-way through it, PP&L poles. It's a 150-foot right-of-way. Our building will sit right outside the right-of-way, which is sort of why it's located where it is on the property. The maximum permitted height is 35 feet. You saw we did a proposed rendering that was on the front of your package of a concept plan that we're working with now. We're looking at about a 28-foot high building. And then the lot was a 5 acre maximum. We are just under the 5 acres, 4.96, just the way it worked out. And maximum lot coverage is 30%. We would propose to design to the 30% level. We might not build the 30% initially, but we want the stormwater management system and everything to accommodate that. And the way it's drawn right now with the pavement around the buildings and the buildings, that constitutes 30% lot coverage. And then I'll go through some of the ordinance Riley had. Part of the requirements were to be able to have trucks enter the site. There's a 100-foot parking setback from a property line. The way we have it designed, the trucks would enter the site on the north side, right under the power lines. That's a natural crest in the road, so you have very good visibility both ways. They would come in. We're proposing 100 feet of a paved area to the north of the building, so a truck could come in, swing around back into the building, pick up and leave the property. They would never back out onto the road. They can do all the turning movements on the site. We are going to propose to pave around the building, but we generally like to keep the trucks on one side. The maximum size of the building was 15,000 square feet. Right now, we're proposing about a 9,000 square foot building to start, but with some future additions, again, planned in, so he has growth. The other features that we are proposing in this plan is there's going to be a horse shed in the back of the property. We have land in the rear that would be left as pasture or, green space back. And we are proposing to have a horse shed. Many of the employees that come to the facility are Amish, or they would come with horse and buggy, place for them to stay. We did not count the horse shed as part of our building coverage because it's just meant to be a shelter to get them out of the sun and rain. It's not meant to be a barn for them to be housed there. And we are proposing an accessory building, which would be a power room, just so that it's not inside the building. The ordinance was for a single building, but we view that as he's going to have a diesel power in there to create the electricity for the air and the tools. So rather than having that from a hazard standpoint, safety standpoint, he wanted that as a separate auxiliary building. So those are our layout plans. The ordinance also had about the residential or agricultural appearance of the building. As part of this, again, I go back, we did a rendering. We put a little steeper pitch roofs on the building. It's proposed to be a metal building, metal siding and roofing, which is consistent with, barn structures. Rather than going with a flat roof, we put a little pitch on it so it looked like it would fit into the neighborhood. Part of the ordinance talks about not generating noxious odors, noise, glare beyond typical generated in an agricultural setting, and would not have noise between the hours of 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. Primarily, all the manufacturing and any related work would be done inside the building. Mr. Smucker is here today. There would be some storage of implements and things outside the building, finished product. He has graders and spreaders and farm equipment, and potentially some raw materials. But all the fabrication and welding and everything would be done inside the building, as the ordinance states. And it does state wherever we put outdoor storage, it would be screened. So as we progress, we'll have some screening probably along the southern boundaries and some other places. The parking requirements state that we provide one parking space for each employee plus parking for customers. Mr. Smucker currently has 6 employees, hopefully in this plan to grow to maybe 10. Generally, he gets 10 to 20 customers a day, picking up, dropping off. There will be a small retail component in the front part of the building where he has parts and pieces and nuts and bolts and gate hinges and those types of things. It's not a full-blown store. There's no permanent manning of a desk, but there is a parts that go along with the farm equipment business. But generally, there's maybe 2 to 4 customers at the site at a time. So we figured 10 to 20 customers per day, 10 employees. Very conservatively speaking, we could have 30 is what we proposed, 30 parking spaces, which would be more than adequate. Actually, a lot of his employees don't even come in cars, but So that's what we have along the Strasburg Pike side, some parking areas. And then we discussed the outdoor storage, and we will do screening, whatever's required by code. And again, all the delivery trucks, we're trying to keep them on one side of the building as much as possible. That is really the essence of my presentation. If you have questions about what we're proposing, the site, the building, the business.
We had a letter from ELA here dated May 19th, so it was just 2 days ago.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure if there were any items in that particular.
I did not see
I
that.
did not receive a copy
Okay.
of that. That was just sent to you guys today,
Okay, gotcha.
because I received it. So they have not, I was gonna bring up two, there's really only two concerns that
Okay.
ELA had. I'll definitely forward you a copy
Okay.
of that.
Mhm.
The first one being the right of way was not sufficient. It's in Arturo Street, Collector Street. It needs to be a 30-foot right of way from center. And I think it's proposed as 15 right now.
Okay, we have our parking setback 30 feet, but we'll adjust that.
Yeah.
We have enough room that we can adjust that. It
Right,
won't
it's
be a
just the
problem.
right of way. And then we had each questioned, we know you're aware of the UPL easement, but have you been in contact with them?
We just put an application in, so we have not gotten any official words from them. I can tell you that I think the last 3 projects it seems like we did were under power lines. I guess you can't avoid them anymore. So yes, we will follow any requirements that PP&L has. But we just made the application because we're going through this process. And just so everybody knows, if you happen to see a drill rig out there, we were doing some site testing just to do some perks and probes and geotechnical, just to make sure the land, before the farmer farms it for the seasons, trying to get out of the field.
Yes, please, go ahead, Mary.
I'm not sure, is this my, like, can they hear me on the guys that are on the phone? Okay, all right, great. 2 questions, the horse shed. And I understand what you're saying, that you're not counting that as part of the building because it's not really a building. Does that mean it's like more like a 3-sided, shed?
Yes,
Is that
that's
what
the
that is?
intention
It's
is,
not like 4-wall little mini barn, it's actually a shed.
yeah, correct. It's gonna be for when the horse, you come to the site to work there, you can put your horse to get him out of the sun, out of the rain, like you see at the giant grocery stores and
Yeah, like
those
3 sides.
types of things, yes.
And then, a question about the type of business. So it's, metalworking and welding. Is there painting involved? And if so, maybe this is out of scope here, but, is that, is proper disposal on site taken care of for that if there's painting involved?
We would be willing to follow, the laws on that. We do, our own painting of new equipment and so forth. And we filter our fumes and so forth, so we are willing to work with what's required for that.
Okay. Again, perhaps that's out of scope of here, but I just put that out there is then maybe to track with them on this to make sure that we've got the right kind of paint, right kind of disposal. I know that kind of stuff can be really tricky and quite a
Right.
hassle. That's all I have.
All right, thanks. Yes, go ahead, Matt.
Another question about the nature of the business. Parking and the access is primarily for employees and trucking, or do you anticipate clients, customers coming in and visiting? Is this purely a shop, or is there people that'll be coming in to?
Yeah, we said they get about 10 to 20 people per day would come in to pick up piece of equipment, I'm sorry if you want to speak, pick up parts at the, grabbing bolts, and he has I mean, you can visit his shop now. He has a small area in the front that has what fence post areas, poles, everything for cars and engines and trucks.
We sort of have a parts department, which is, we supply like common parts for farmers, like fasteners, bearings, roller chain, and things, you know, to sort of what a farmer may need to maintain equipment and like power transmission parts and things like that. We carry a minimum amount of actual tools and hardware. We, you know, mainly focus on a parts based store.
I guess I'm just trying to get a sense for, is it primarily heavy equipment, or would you get somebody coming into, you know, they have a small lawn tractor that they need something done on it? Would they come to you, or generally not?
We get a lot of repairs. We get lawnmower repairs. We sort of have I guess a 50-year reputation of, you know, as a welding repair business, you know, and yeah, we see anything. You know, so we're very diversified, but primarily farming, you know, was always our focus, you know, to tend to the farmer's needs.
In the plan, you'll see, we did a plan of the proposed layout. There's a general office area, which is up, this is a side facing Strasburg Pike, and there's about 1,000 square feet, what we call as a retail area. That's like his parts department.
And then maybe just touching back on the horse shed again, I just wanted to make sure that I understood, is that consistent with the intent of the revised ordinance that, I mean, will it have a paved floor?
No, it would be a dirt floor.
Oh, okay,
All right. It's basically just
just a.
like Larry said, a shelter like you would see at Costco, just something to
Yeah.
get the animals out of the wind and the rain, you know.
Okay, that's all I have.
Hey, Jim, this is Andy.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
So just to spin off on, I think with Matt's question right there, you know, kind of on this horse shed. I guess the question I have is, if it has a roof, is it somehow exempt from the impervious? If that whole shaded area around the building is basically the blacktop, is everything that's coverage area, like 30%, I think is what it was. Does that roof of that shed become exempt for some reason, or maybe that's really my question? Or does it have to actually be included in that if it's an actual roof?
I'll have Amanda confirm this. I believe it does
I
have to
think
be
it does
counted.
need to be counted, yes. And as a roof, it's
yes.
impervious at that point, so it would need to be calculated with the rest.
All right, and then just a question on the outdoor storage that's mentioned. I'm not sure how to quite ask this. Is all the storage gonna be on somewhere on the blacktop area? That's like one question. You mentioned screening. I assume all the storage is kind of open air. And I say that because if it leads off of the impervious area and some kind of roof ends up over that would be a concern. And then, like, what will the outdoor storage consist of? You mentioned repairs. I mean, it's kind of negative, but I see a lot of repair places have mower graveyards. So I guess, I don't know if that's something that might end up here or not.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what the graveyard thing was.
Sir, can you step forward when you're coming back there?
He was
So like
asking,
if you're repairing mowers and the mowers end up living at your shop for a long time, is that something that's gonna be stored, or is it simply gonna be materials?
It will primarily materials probably. Now we do get, now our smaller items, like, you know, if it's like a lawnmower, like a deck mower or something like that, you know, we could store something like that inside. But when you start looking at bigger equipment, like farm equipment, like, you know, sickle bar mowers, you know, cut dishners and things like that, those, you know, we would have to keep items like that outside because they fill up shop space too fast. So,
Yeah, I think he was asking if items transition through on a regular basis. His concern was if something would sit there for, let's say, a year and not move at all.
yeah.
Or, I'm not sure what length of time you're referring to, Andy, but the length of time that's unreasonable.
Yeah, no,
It's
the
not being
turnover,
worked on, it's just sitting there.
the turnover primarily, is within a few weeks, of pieces coming in and going out.
And all this storage would be on the paved area, so, I mean, that's the point of making a paved area, that's.
You're not gonna push it back on the horse lot then?
Hopefully not.
All right, does that answer your question?
That's what I was getting at, Jim.
Okay. Anyone else who's joining us remotely, do you have any questions? I'll take that as a no. Okay, well, the process for this, do you have any other questions before I wrap it up here?
I just have a comment. I mean, I appreciate you, you guys taking this time, because this is, and having the patience with us for, being a trendsetter. So, we're, trying to get all of our questions figured out here, so appreciate your patience.
So, yeah, same here, very detailed presentation, so definitely thank you for that as well. So this was just a discussion for conditional use. We'll move on to the Board of Supervisors, and then there'll be opportunities again to review it when they come in for land development, just to give you an idea of the pathway. Correct?
Correct, yeah.
At what point would any additional comments by the, from the LH letter, what point will they be addressed?
That's up to the applicant. What they've sent in currently is what I have set to go before the Board of Supervisors next month for the actual hearing. But this letter will go to them. They can incorporate, those questions now. And then when you go before the Board of Supervisors, they can let them know that, yes, we've incorporated these changes already. And then after that, it does come back to Planning Commission at that time when it comes in for prelim land development. We'll go through the whole review process. ELA will do a more in-depth review, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, we have a civil engineer lined up to do the land development drawings and all this stormwater analysis and engineering portion of it, but we're just trying to get through the use to make sure we can build this before we spend that money.
Very good, thank you.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, here in a moment, the next item on the agenda as far as new business will be the Willow Street Corner, 2504 Willow Street Pike. Before the presentation begins, I am going to recuse myself from this presentation and turn it over to Mr. Groff to lead the discussion.
Thanks, Jim. We'd like to welcome you to take the floor. Introduce yourselves.
Ready?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I'm acting as, with our chair recusing himself, I'm acting as the,
Oh, okay, Chair.
Good.
Good. Hi, I'm Melvin Hess. I'm from Gibble, Crable and Hess, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, and I have Eric Harmon here with me from Life Hygo, and also Neil Javanin, who is the applicant. As you guys know from the petition that we served on you all, it deals with 2504, 2506, 2508 Willow Street. You guys know where it is. It's just an radio station. And you're very familiar with it, I'm sure, and you can imagine some of the site conditions and the restrictions limiting the owner of that when they tried to think about improving it, about expanding it, to do anything. We got parking issues, we got all sorts of issues. Oh, good, okay.
Can you guys see that on?
Yeah.
And, so in any event, we were pushing around, I mean, discussing several options over the last year and a half, met with staff twice, I think, on this project. And, reached the conclusion that really, the only way this is gonna work if we consider rezoning. And if you look at the neighborhood, I respectfully suggest it makes some sense to consider rezoning of this property, as it's certainly all around us, that's what's there. If you look at this property and you go up to Beaver Valley Road, first of all, Neil owns these three properties. The third one, he has an equitable interest, but we'll own that shortly. They're going to close it shortly. So if you go from there up, there's only 2 residential properties left. And the rest are already commercial. And if you look at the zoning ordinance and the various zoning districts, in this instance, of course, we're dealing with the mainstream limited, we're seeking to have it converted to the commercial highway. The commercial highway ordinance and the purpose laws and the discussion about that focuses on highways, what's around highways, and actually talks about automobile related services. And certainly you got the major, I guess the most major highway in your township is this highway, isn't it? It's gotta be, I guess it is. So I would suggest that, I want Eric to discuss this at greater length, of course, but I would think with this property where it's located, the traffic, the highway, and surrounding properties, that it makes some sense to consider this rezoning. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric. Eric works for Light Highway, as I indicated. He's been with them for 18 years. Light Highway, as you may know, they're consultants for many municipalities in land planning. So I've asked him to look at this and give his opinion of whether he believes there's going to be any serious or appreciable effect on the character of the neighborhood. Also, if you look at the ordinance, it talks about any architecturally significant buildings, which you understandably would like to protect, but we're not dealing with that with these 2 structures. Further down, maybe, but not these 2 structures. But in any event, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric and introduce some of the factors that we've considered and ask you to consider.
Thank you, Mel. As Mel said, it's the 3 properties here at the north end of that triangle you get between Willow Street North and Willow Street South. I know doesn't look like the picture quality's great here with that, but you have the existing Sunoco station at the north, which is, I'd just like to note that the Sunoco or a gas station is not a permitted use in that MSL district, the Main Street Limited District. But it would be a
This is attached to.
We do
you
that.
have-
Yeah,
I
okay,
think we
great.
do. So yes, if you just point to the map, we can try.
Yeah, great, that's perfect. It is a special exception use within the commercial highway, so it's not permitted by right, but it's more conforming to the commercial highway district than it is the Main Street Limited District. And then the 2 properties directly south of the Sunoco station, which, as Mel said, one is currently under ownership by Mr. Giovanni and his wife, and the third property is under a sales agreement, which they will own soon. The neighboring property to the south of that is currently a commercial use. It is I believe it's a hair salon. Then you have a property owned by Willow Valley Associates, and then beyond that, you have the credit union. Other things I'd like to note are the fact that this is at the very north end of this Main Street Limited District, directly adjacent to your commercial highway. So we think that it's not incongruous with the neighboring zoning and the neighborhood here. I don't believe that this would be a zoning change that would adversely affect the character of this neighborhood, because 50% of this change is an existing gas station use right now. And this change would just allow Mr. and Mrs. Giovanni to develop this property a little bit more, expand this property, and give them a little bit more use of that property. The other thing I wanted to mention was that in the current comprehensive plan. It identifies the village areas, the two village areas in the township, one being Lampeter and the other being the Willow Street Village. That zoning carries through this piece of land, but I would note that in the comprehensive plan, it does mention Beaver Valley Pike as being kind of a natural northern limit of that Willow Street Village. So we do feel like this area that we've targeted is a more natural expansion of the commercial highway district, especially since you have the convergence of that main highway right there at this property. And that was all I had to.
I think also there's, what you may not know, we're dealing with PennDOT, significant PennDOT right away. So Neil he can't do anything going north. I mean, he really can't. The other issue, of course, as you can imagine, just looking at this site, is parking issues. If he wants to expand it at all, we can't do it on that lot. You simply can't do it, and comply with your parking requirements. And vehicular circulation within the area, the site, is now it's extraordinarily difficult. If you try to expand it all the use, you got serious problems and risk. I mean, safety issues. In my mind. When you come north, as you may know, the road takes a sort of a strange bend, and it's tough to see that entrance when you're coming up, and know where that you're supposed to turn. And the traffic is coming from 2 lanes to 1, a lot of speed, and in my mind, right now, it's inherently dangerous. This allows him, with the extra space, to put an entrance further south so you can safely enter it, and allows for circulation of traffic within the sites. So,
All done through PennDOT, of course. You know,
Right.
the improvements would be done through the highway occupancy permit. Like, they've got an application in right now for a traffic impact study scoping application, where they're going to meet virtually with PennDOT to discuss improvements. And like Mel said, the addition of the 2 parcels we mentioned to the south, combined with the zoning change, enabling this property to be further developed or expanded, and also allowing for those PennDOT required safety improvements, a deceleration lane and relocation of access points, which should all improve the safe ingress and egress to the site.
And the other thing which I'd like to point out is Anil owned this since 2003, so this isn't like somebody coming in and just buying something and asking immediately for relief. And during the time he's here, he sees all this commercial development all around him, and you gotta compete with this. You know, and he can't do it on what he has now. He can't do it, he simply can't do it, so. That's all we have. I'll certainly entertain any questions.
Do you have any questions from the floor or from the phone?
Yeah, well,
Mary?
sort of question, comment, but you mentioned that it could improve traffic, and I follow what you're saying there, but it would also introduce a good bit more traffic that's coming into that space. So that's all being looked at.
Considered.
I don't know if traffic study is the right word, but, you know, as far as the volume coming in there, would, you know, if his business venture goes away, it wants to, would hopefully for him increase a good deal. And so
And that,
it adds an issue that has to be addressed as well.
and that is it. And we have to deal with PennDOT on that as well.
Yeah.
And not just the township.
Right.
But we understand it. And it's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, and that is all considered, it's all part of the equation, so to speak, when they're looking at the trip generation. And he had, Anil has a traffic engineer that he's engaged with right now that's assisting him through the traffic impact study and the highway occupancy permit with PennDOT.
And maybe I should have done some more homework too, but what are the primary differences between the MSL zoning and the commercial highway zoning. What is it that provides you, that allows you to do what you're intending to do?
Yeah, so the Main Street Limited District, it does allow for a mix of residential and commercial uses, but it does not allow for as many commercial uses. And, you know, the gas station was the one example I gave where it is not permitted in the Main Street Limited, but it is permitted by special exception in the commercial highway. So I give the example very nearby, the Turkey Hill went and got a special exception from your zoning hearing board back in 2015. Special exception is a much more easy process to go through than a use variance. A use variance has a high level of standard, as Mel could speak to from the legal end, whereas a special exception has that defined set of criteria that if you can satisfy that, then you should be allowed to do that use with that criteria and any reasonable conditions that are imposed by the board. Another example would be restaurants and drive-throughs, things of that nature. Those are the types of uses that are permitted within your commercial highway and are not permitted within your Main Street Limited District. There's a few other commercial uses that I could go on and explain, but it's mainly that variety of commercial uses that you would see along your highway corridor that are allowed by right or by special exception within that CH district.
And the other thing I think to keep in mind is your ordinance permits an expansion of a non-conforming use. It has its limitations, of course, but does permit it. And that's another issue, is he can't safely expand where he is, in that one lot. You can't do it, really. And with all the site conditions and the increased traffic, if you expand at all. So that's, even though your ordinance permits it, the site, the particular lot limits his ability to even comply with the ordinance and expand what he would otherwise have a right to do.
Hey, Amanda, this is Andy.
Yeah.
Can you clarify that comment there, like they're allowed to do expansion on a non-conforming? So I don't know how to explain how so there's a gas station there, they can expand the gas station.
Yes.
Assuming that's what that means. So what extent though? Like, does that mean they can
There's a
rip out
certain,
all the pumps and move them?
there is a certain square footage requirement. There are provisions for expansion on a non-conforming use. And to clarify that a little further, this is a legal non-conforming use. It was legal when it began in the 80s, I believe. The zoning changed, which in turn turned it into a legal non-conforming. So,
I think you're now 50% increase.
yeah, it's a 50% increase, correct?
Do we have any other questions or comments from the phone? Garrett or Matt?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, if I understand our duty here this evening would be to move forward with a recommendation or either approval or denial. Are there any other questions before we entertain a motion?
I have a question. Mel, so regarding the single lot and the expansion of the non-conforming, I get what we're saying about it not being large enough for expansion there, but has Emil not entertained the lot consolidation with the other two?
You would,
Okay,
they do that, and
okay,
and that's what's contemplated.
okay.
I might not have followed you on Amanda on that.
So basically, I was just asking that in the event that the rezone is not approved, would the property owner then still follow through with the lot consolidation of all three and then propose the expansion of the non-conforming with all three of the lots.
Okay,
Yes.
instead of changing the zoning,
Correct.
we just do non-conforming.
I think that's a more, it's just, you gotta jump through more hoops doing that, expanding, not gonna be used to it.
It does, it's worth noting that it does restrict what he can, excuse me, what he can and cannot do by right as part of that expansion. A big trend right now in retail and especially gas stations, and I'm gonna use some names here of, Sheetz or Rudders or Wawa. It is it's like a convenience store on steroids in these days. And what some of the little mom and pop shops look to do to try to compete with those rivals is to try to get multi-tenant uses in convenience stores. And I don't believe he could do that by right in this district. I think it's a natural expansion of this use, and I think it puts him on par with his competitors, but he would not be able to do it in the Main Street Limited District without a use variance. And that's tough to get.
And I think also, I ask you to kindly keep in mind what is all around them. And it really is highway commercial. all around.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Do we have any action on the floor or by phone to this presentation?
So I'm gonna ask another question. Do we have a history or an understanding of what the intent of the Main Street Limited Zone is and that location? Is there?
So Main Street Limited is geared toward the preservation of architecturally important structures, basically. So I think the historic homes toward the southern end are what it was geared toward. And what Mel kind of explained is what's going on the northern end. Yes, this initial parcel has always been commercial. It was built that way from the beginning. Moving down, the next property over is a ranch. I think there are two ranches. And then it moves into a small, low volume commercial use, the hair salon, and then I believe office space by Willow Valley, and then credit union. Moving further, you have the older homes, what the district was geared toward protecting, basically. So it does kind of make sense that really what's going on at the northern end is more consistent with commercial use.
Yeah, I would agree.
I have another question, sorry.
Like, go ahead, Andy.
So I'm looking at the zoning map, and man, I'm just curious around there. That commercial highway is kind of to the south and to the west. Was any of that ever Main Street Limited got switched over? I'm just guessing because I don't know.
Not to my knowledge, I don't believe it was.
I have no,
The zoning map I have from '06 shows commercial highway where it is currently. I don't have the older maps with me though to confirm anything prior to that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mary, were you going to say something?
No.
You started talking about the same time Andy did, didn't want to cut you off.
No, that's good. My hesitation to be quite transparent here is because I am newer on the board and I don't want to miss something. It looks to be very much in keeping with the area around it. So if it's not inappropriate to do so, I will move that we recommend approval. So can I go forward with reading? Okay. I move we recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors of the petition from Willow Street Corner LP to amend the zoning map of West Mankato Township to rezone the 3 parcels as described in the applicant's petition along the Willow Street Pike from their current designation of Main Street Limited to Commercial Highway.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Matt. Is there any discussion to this motion?
Steve, this is Matt.
Yes.
I could not hear the motion, which version of the motion that we did. I couldn't hear any of it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is it like not on or how does this work?
Move it closer to you and read it again.
Okay, now you gotta hear me again, sorry.
We'll try this again, Matt.
If you just did the first part, that's the
Yes,
first.
I move we recommend approval. Blah, blah, blah.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. I couldn't, that was sort of the critical part I needed to hear. So thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Yes, the motion is to recommend the approval. Correct. Not hearing any other questions, we'll entertain a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
We didn't hear everybody on the phone.
Can we have everybody on the phone?
Who was I on the phone?
Matt?
Garrett, aye.
Andy's nay, sorry.
So if I understand right, we have 4 ayes, 1 nay.
Five ayes, one no.
1 no. Thank you. And the motion is passed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
See ya.
Thank you.
Jim? Turn the meeting back over to Jim.
All right, thank you, Mr. Groff. Next item on the agenda is community development report, please.
I have nothing substantial to report. I will say, just kind of playing off of the Smucker application tonight, what you will see eventually in the future is a separate land development coming through for the northern portion of that property. We actually just went through a stormwater management plan for a barn and a driveway, for a non-household stable. It is the property owner's son that will be occupying that space. They went through stormwater just to get the barn done and all of that. They are proposing a single-family household as well. They will be handling that separate with land development in the future. Along with that, AFG Trucking on the northern end is almost complete with all of their construction. However, they will be coming back potentially for modification of their land development regarding the paving on site. They need to expand that evidently, so they are completing what they have currently on the plans, getting that done, and then coming back later for modification. So keep an eye out for that. Snyder Funeral Home, I expect an application from them for their new location very soon. So that'll be before us shortly. Dee Dee and I sat in on a discussion with the county regarding a roadway improvement project at 222 and 324, which is the whole intersection of Lancaster City, Lancaster Township, West St. Peters Township. Who else did I forget? Anyone?
Lancaster Township, Lancaster City, Westland, I think that's it.
Okay.
Is that enough? Yeah.
That's enough. So
Can you
they're
get
in the
everyone to
beginning
hold
phases.
hands?
Do what?
Can you get everyone to hold hands?
I mean, you could.
Not these days.
Not these days.
Right,
Um,
right.
So it was an interesting discussion, just seeing sort of what they're projecting there, but it's very early phases. They're just going through feeling, they don't even have necessarily a concept right now. I think when the county did their traffic impact, they did a whole plan, what, a year ago? And they showed a traffic circle basically in this area, and evidently that's no longer even a concept. So it's all starting over, but we'll be seeing that moving forward. And then I will let Dee update you on Village Park.
Yes, if you would like an update on Village Park, I don't know if anybody's curious. The board will take formal action at their meeting in June, but it looks as if we will be pretty much stopping where we are with the development and the improvements to that park. We've already signed contracts and committed to over $2.5 million worth of work to be done at that park. Based on a couple of different things, not the least of which is the fact that the township is probably looking at least a 20% decrease in earned income tax revenue for this year, which is our largest source of revenue. As you all know, we don't know. We're guessing, we're estimating, but we probably are looking at least a 20% decrease. Fundraising has basically stopped at this point. That's not to say we won't continue to try, but it's not a great time to ask people for money. Additionally, we are unsure of the future of the YMCA. I would imagine that most of you have seen or heard they are in serious financial trouble. They have reached out to the community, as you probably saw, looking for some assistance to help them from declaring bank.
Matt got disconnected. Okay, here we go.
You're interrupting the meeting. Yes. Anyway, the situation with the YMCA is concerning, I'm sure, for everybody, for the whole community. Not knowing what the outcome of that is going to be. The lease agreement with the township basically says that if they were to default or declare bankruptcy, the township would take over ownership of the building. Now, the attorneys are reviewing the lease agreement now to make sure that we understand completely. I mean, obviously, for those of you that were around, this was a partnership we entered into from the LS Rec Commission years and years and years ago, which was West Lampeter, Strasburg Borough, Strasburg Township, and the school district. We all were part of the LS Rec Commission, which then all of those programs and et cetera were turned over to the Y. So we would, first step would be to work with those entities to see if they wanted anything to do with it, if they wanted to have any involvement, whatever the case may be. But we would end up with the building. As I understand the agreement, it is, the first option would be to keep it as a community, somewhat fitness facility, very similar to what it has been since the beginning, if at all possible. Part of my concern is that fitness centers, YMCA's are, I think they're going to be a completely different business model than what we've seen 3 months ago. I think that's going to change quite a bit. So if we have to step in and take it over, I'm not quite sure what that would look like. You know, I think everybody hopes that the YMCA will be able to make it, they'll get the funding they need and be able to continue. They will have to make changes, obviously, but, you know, we would love to see them stay there and continue to do what they've been doing for years. But when you add all these things up and add all of these uncertainties and unknowns that we have right now, the board feels the need to just pretty much stop where we are. The good thing is that means that in 2021, 2022, we will have completely operational fields. I mean, all of the excavating and the dirt work will be done, the fencing will be up, scoreboards, the playground will be in, basketball courts will be done. So we really will have the majority of the park project complete. We just cannot commit to anything further than what we've already committed to. And that would include things like the fitness center and pavilions, unfortunately.
The pavilions, restrooms, that whole thing, yeah.
Yes, unfortunately. But we will have a functional park. And we will have functional playing fields, which was a very big deal for everyone. You know, I wish we had more money and we knew what the future held and could commit to, you know, building at least one of the pavilions, but at this point, we're just not in a position to do that.
I think it's responsible. I'm curious, is the excavation,
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Okay, just a couple quick questions. So I'm sorry I got cut off as you were saying about the project. So if I'm putting those pieces together, are you saying that they're moving forward with the excavation and putting the fields in and not putting the pavilions in?
Correct. We are going to finish, we're going to finish everything that we've started and everything that we have contracted to do. Yes.
Okay. So then my other two questions would be, what, you know, in a worst case scenario where, you know, they do default and the township assumes ownership or is in that position, do we know the amount of debt that property carries with it? And the second part of that question, is there anything that would preclude us from going to a private entity to operate if we wanted to continue to have it as a community/business center?
To answer your first question, I don't know. I understand that the debt for the Lancaster YMCA organization is roughly $6 million. I specifically asked the question, what of that $6 million might be affiliated or attached with the LS facility, and I was told that the person I spoke to did not know. So unfortunately, I could not get an answer to that. Obviously, if worst case scenario, you know, comes about, we will definitely be getting numbers then. The answer to your second question is yes. If just throwing, you know, an LA Fitness or, you know, a Gold's Gym or something like that wanted to come in and lease the facility to run their business, as I understand the lease, we could do that, yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Dee Dee, I was curious if with the excavation that is being complete, does that include the underground plumbing for the future pavilions?
Yes, it
Awesome.
includes the plumbing, the water, the electrical, all of that will be done.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, that is a very substantial
It is.
milestone. and,
It
yeah.
really is. Like I said, you know, the two biggest things that we just don't have the funds for right now are the pavilions and the fitness court.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great phase to be in. I mean, actually, compared to where we were 15 years ago. I never thought it would happen this fast, so.
That's true. That's the
It's great to
positive
see
way
it.
to look at it, yeah.
It's great to see. It's a 25-year plan, you know, plus.
And the paving, I neglected to mention, We will probably just do the base coat for the paving, but we would do the paving as well for the drive and the parking, that sort of thing.
Well, thank you for that update. Appreciate that. You know, a lot of questions circulating around after that letter came out from the YMCA. Yeah. Any other further discussions or questions? Anyone remotely have any questions?
No, I don't have any other questions.
All right.
Everybody's going well, and everything's best.
Okay, I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn then.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, thank you, Mr. Groff. A second?
Second.
All right, second and third. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I see some of them have 50